by doing a roll call of our board members. So our vice chair, Dawn Mottner, she is excused today. Greg Klauser, I believe I saw you already. Great. Hello, Greg. Chicky Flowers, have you been able to join us yet? I don't think Chicky's here yet. Andy Foltz is going to join us at 10:30, so she is not here yet. Kimberly Hendricks. Kimberly, are you here yet? I don't see Kimberly here yet. I know Kate Nass is excused today. Sean Parkman, I see you on video. Hello.
Morning.
Morning. And I don't believe Representative Nose is joining us today either, since the legislature is quite busy. So we are not going to approve the minutes first thing, since we do not have a quorum at this moment. I do believe we will have a quorum later. We do have a lot of business to go through today, a lot of information to look at, but we do not have action items around making decisions for our 2024 renewal. So I just want to make sure board members are aware of that. And we will just go ahead and move to our risk stabilization fund report. I believe Emery's leading that. So Emery, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. So this first presentation is the Risk Stabilization Fund update. Let's move to the next slide, please. So what we do with this report is basically take a look at the projected costs in the future, the next few years, and then compare that against the funding, essentially the 3.4% limited funding that PEBB is subject to. And what we do is, take a look and see if there's going to be potential shortfalls or surpluses and the impact on the stabilization fund. We do any shortfalls would be potentially covered by the risk stabilization fund. Any surpluses would build it up. And what we do is we want to have a certain level of reserve, the RBC, risk-based capital, that is held to potentially offset large fluctuations in claims. So as we move on to the next slide. So risk-based capital is essentially a way of measuring how much money or capital that a insurance company needs to have to guard against insolvency. It's not quite the same as what's happening with the SVB Bank, in terms of funding, but it's kind of similar. It's like, do you have enough money to offset the potential payment out of your accounts in case of certain situations? And in this case, the main risk is basically the underwriting, which is the process we're going through right now for the future, where we take the claims and project forward. And let's move to the next slide. Where we take the claims and we project forward based on trend, any changes to population, plan designs, and over the past few years, dealing with the pandemic. And as well as large claims and other random fluctuations. So these are areas which can impact your claims and potentially add or decrease to the surplus. So this report kind of takes a look and moves forward on this. Next slide. So this is like the results. So nice high executive summary of what we're going to see on the following slides. So for 22, the claim cost did improve very slightly over the prior report. But for 23 and beyond, we did increase the trend rates. And so as a result, the costs are projected higher and the surpluses, if projected, are smaller compared to the prior report. The trend rate increases there you see in bullet number 2. We did increase to 6.5% for the medical from 5.75. Prescription drug is still at 10. And then we also increased vision to 3% from 2%. So what does that impact on the RBC? So on the RBC for 2023, the reprojected surplus is about 34 million, which is about the same. But 24 now has a deficit of about 7 million. So this 24 deficit of 7 million is a little bit different from what you're going to see in the renewal presentation in the next one. It's very similar, in terms of that the costs are coming in a little bit higher than the 3.4% limitation. What's included here is a little bit different than the composite rate, but overall there is going to be a small deficit projected for 24, which in the renewal report, you needs to essentially be made up for in one way or another. So moving in future years, stabilization fund is projected based on the market trends to be slightly below the target in 26, but it does stay in the range. So it's not you're not dropping into a big deficit position, but it is decreasing over the next few years. One thing to note, we have a penalty associated for the 2021 fund transfer, but as Ali has mentioned in the past about a potential fund transfer in the next year or two based on the budget, that is not included. So I believe there was maybe potentially 90 million. Ali, I don't know if you're on and want to provide any information about that, but there is a potential for a larger fund transfer that's not included in this report.
I don't believe Ali's on yet. He's going to
Okay.
join us. He had to testify at the legislature this morning, but I don't know, Damien, is this something you
Yeah.
want to respond to?
I have no updated information other than what we've seen as proposed in the governor's budget.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. So just wanted to keep that in mind as we take a look at some of these graphs and tables. One thing that is a little bit new is just kind of like potential, I guess, we show in the report, we show like if you cap claims at 3.4%, what the impact is on the stabilization fund. We kind of wanted to show, I guess, the potential downside. So costs do come in and the trends are very high. And they're 2% higher than what we are using as the market trend. We do show what the impact is on the RBC. So the fund balance ends up falling below starting in 2025. So it's definitely much sooner. And then the decrease is even bigger in 26. But we will could talk a little bit more about that when we get to that page. Any comments or questions on this summary of the results? Okay, moving on to the next slide. So this is what the market trends and the projected costs. So what we show in the chart below, the purple line's the projected ending fund balance for each of those years. And then we have the reserve target based on the claims and the RBC percentages down below in the boxes, and the line is the target, which is in the middle. So as you can see right now for 22, the projected ending fund balance is actually above the reserve target, 358 million approximately, compared to reserve target about 214 million. So you do have about 145 million or so, what we would consider a surplus in this case. For 23, as mentioned earlier, it is projected to grow a little bit. So the ending fund balance does grow a bit. Its reserve target grows, but not quite as much as the ending fund balance. So your surplus is a little bit bigger. But then 24, it starts shrinking. 25, it goes down. And as mentioned earlier, 26, the target and ending fund balance actually are pretty close. Essentially, if claims are increasing at that 6.5% per year for medical, and no plan design changes are made, and you get funding at 3.4%. By 26, you're still okay, but you can see that the costs are increasing faster than the funding. And so that would definitely put you in a bit of a deficit position in 27 and beyond, but at least for the next few years, you're okay.
And Ali, I'm sorry, Emery, I just wanted to double check my assumptions here. So what this chart shows is if we didn't adjust so that we were actually at 3.4%, but the market rate was higher than that and we had to dip into reserves, this is where we would be.
Yes,
is that correct?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. So this is essentially status quo, no plan design changes, and the market trends do hold true. So I know in the past, we tried to get costs at 3.4%, and that's one of the next slides, and you make some adjustments to get to that. Yeah, if you just basically deficit spend, spend through the surplus, this is what would happen to it. Next slide. This kind of just shows the cost versus the funding, as well as the percentage changes over the year. So you can see for 22, the costs increased on the left in the blue by 2%. The funding did increase by 2.4%. So you end up having a bigger surplus than what was in 21 in this case. For 23, the funding increased at 4.6%. That's bigger than the 3.4% as there's some shifts in basic the projections, as well as people shifting plans. So that's why it's a little bit bigger. The projected costs are increasing at 5.9%. So your surplus is shrinking. The blue bar is below the green bar, but it's a smaller gap. And then for 24, as you can see, the projected costs are right now above the funding. So that's where we're running into that potential deficit position, and where the projected costs are above the composite rate, and potential need to cut down to reach the 3.4%. And then for 25 and 26, we increase based on market trends. So you can see the 5.8% versus the 3.4% funding. Next slide, please. This is one where it kind of shows the performance of PEBB over multiple years. As you can see, starting in 2018 and compared to that point, the cost increases have been below 3.4% per year. So that green line's the growth, 3.4%. You can see that for 2020, with the COVID pandemic, claims definitely dropped quite a bit. They rebounded 21 and 22, a little bit of an increase over 21, not that huge bounce back that some were fearing, but so it ended up being a bit of a surplus. And then, 23, the costs are increasing, and 24 were projected increases based on what our preliminary renewals. And that kind of, the 24 it's a bigger increase, but you're still below, I guess, 3.4 historically, if we take a look at over the last 7 years or so. Next slide, please. So slide 9 kind of shows where the fund balance would be if you do make cuts to reduce costs to 3.4%. Instead of deficit spending, you actually make plan design, or you are able to implement programs that have bend the trend to get to 3.4%. And as a result, you're going to be above your reserve target because you currently have a surplus. You start spending down a little bit, but you're still going to be above the target through 2026. And it's just trying to keep essentially costs in line with your funding for the most part. And so you're in a pretty good position if you can do that. Okay. Next slide. So this is the kind of the new slide where we show essentially 3 different scenarios. So the purple line at the top in the chart is what we just saw on the prior slide, where you have a cost increasing at 3.4% in line with funding. So your ending stabilization fund balance, and that's what this shows, stays relatively flat. And so by 2026, it's about $96 million. If you do start deficit spending to offset the market trend costs, as mentioned on, I guess, the first set of slides, by 2026, you're basically just below the target by, in this case, $7 million. So you're in line at that point, but you are deficit spending to get to that point. And the worst case scenario, so if costs are 2% higher than market trends and no plan design changes are done to offset that increased cost, you can see the gap starts increasing. So we applied a 2% difference in 24. So essentially, if there's a 2% higher actual cost versus what we're projecting on trend, hopefully it doesn't happen, but in case it does happen, you can see the deficit for 24 starts increasing, and then that exacerbates in 25 to the point where you're actually below your target, and then 26 you're essentially I guess most of your stabilization fund would be used up. So really high trends with no plan design changes is not going to put you in a good position. I guess it's a little bit of a, we need to watch the trends and potentially do things to help bend that curve. So you're one of the, top two lines in this case. Any questions, comments? No? Okay. Next slide. So just some of the data and assumptions. So basically, oops, that should be claims through 23. So we used claims through January 23. We did take a look at enrollment for December 22 as well, January 23. Some information on the market trend rates. Payments out of the fund that are shown, vaccine incentives, we had about 600,000 through July of 22. And then we showed the surpluses that are being paid by for the tobacco surcharge as well as the spousal surcharge, the $50 spousal surcharge. And then the projections there on the right, talking about the trend rates that we use in our projections. Next slide, next appendix. So let's move on to the next one. Thank you. So the information that's shown in the chart, the next two slides show the actual numbers that go into it. So you can take a look at the various costs for the year, which is like over $1 billion at the top line, as well as the per employee per month costs. And then you can see the surcharges, HEM refunds, and vaccine incentives and other outflows out of the stabilization fund. And then in that middle section, we talk about the funding plus the increase 3.4% from the composite rate from last year for 24, plus additional 3.4% for 25 and 26. And then you can see in the blue line, the projected surplus deficit for each of those plan years. And in this case, it's surplus for 22 and 23. In 24, we start getting into a small deficit position, and then that deficit position increases for 25 and 26. And the net result on that is the stabilization fund gets shrinks as you deficit spend. And so the ending fund stabilization fund ends at 275 million roughly, and the reserve target based on your claims is about 282 million. So that's the $7 million delta that we showed on the prior page. The next slide shows the costs if they increase at 3.4%. And so that keeps the stabilization fund above the reserve target. In this case, it's 96 million at the end of 26. And then the next two slides I should just show the risk-based capital targets and the ranges. So if you wanted to see those numbers by plan, that's in the next two slides. But that's the information that we wanted to present today. Wondering if there's any final questions, comments? Okay, hearing none, I think we can probably move on to the round two renewals. And I'll turn it over to Andrew. Oh, sorry, I guess I'm.
No worries. Thanks, Emery. I just want to do a quick check. I know that I believe Chicky Flowers is on now. Correct? Yes, I see you. Good morning. And I think we are still one shy of quorum, so we will do the minutes. I know Andy's planning to get here at 10:30. All right, so Andrew, back to you so we can talk about round two renewals.
All righty, thank you, Siobhan. Okay, so I think we've got a little bit over an hour for this portion of the discussion. That might sound like a lot, but as Siobhan said at the outset, there's a lot of content in here. And so with some of these slides, we might sort of cruise through them so that we can really prioritize spending time on the areas that really require more robust discussion. And so with me, I've got Emery and Sally, as noted on the slide. A few other folks on the Mercer team are joining us. Christy Ewing, who's our health equity workstream leader on the Mercer side, and Dr. Chuang, who's our clinical leader. And so you'll hear from them as well as we make our way through this content. So Maggie, if you can jump to the next slide, please. I'll just quickly go over the agenda before we jump in. With this first item, the renewal background, this is the way that we kick off all these meetings, right? We'll sort of spend some time regrounding in PEBB's vision and guiding principles, health equity focus, and check in on the 2024 and long-term goals. With that second item there, we'll recap the action that was taken in February, which was the canopy renewal, as well as provide some additional exhibits for some follow-up questions that were posed around trend components and cost drivers. So we got a couple slides on that as well. With the third section, this is probably where we'll spend a lot of our time today. And this is really going through the medical, dental, vision renewals. So some of the clinical programs that are being proposed, as well as some administrative changes that are being proposed. You know, we continue to work with carrier partners, work with OHA staff to continue to analyze some of those options. The next other renewals is around Weight Watchers and WebMD. So we did cut that content from the last board meeting just in the interest of time, but those are two benefits that are renewing. And so we'll spend some time talking about those as well. The fifth section, strategies for achieving 3.4%. You know, this part will sort of hang nicely with the RBC presentation that Emery just gave. We'll talk through what that might look like as we continue to update cost projections, negotiate with carriers, that sort of thing. And then we'll talk about next steps. As per usual, just jump in with any questions. I'll try to keep an eye out for anyone who raises their hand. Feel free to just jump in verbally as well, and Mercer team, just keep me honest if you see a hand go up and I miss it. So let's jump to slide 4. And so just want to spend a couple of minutes here on vision guiding principles, health equity, and long-term goals. I know that board members, you've all seen this many times. It is a good sort of time of the year to review this every month, because this really can be used as a decision-making tool as we evaluate different strategies and make sure they still fit within the guiding principles and what you're trying to achieve on behalf of your members, as well as the delivery system and the needs of the plan sponsor itself. So let's jump to the health equity slide, please, Maggie. These are the strategic pillars. We haven't updated this since we went through the exercise of revisiting it during the retreat in late 2022. But nonetheless, again, because decisions are being analyzed and vetted that will impact members, it's a good sort of time to bring this forward and make sure we're all thinking through any potential changes with sort of health equity at the center. You know, the goals, which we'll talk about on the next slide, they sort of might be prioritized differently in a renewal year that's more challenging versus a more favorable renewal. Okay, thanks, Maggie. And so just something to keep in mind, and we'll in a couple of slides we'll get to what that delta looks like between our projected costs versus that composite rate, which needs to hit the 3.4%, and it has improved somewhat, but nonetheless, you know, in a challenging renewal cycle, there might be more priority on certain goals. For example, ensuring the richness of the benefit while managing cost. That's likely a big one that's going to be a focus as we continue to go through and make decisions on how the program and plans might change in 2024. Many of these goals are addressed through the renewal work. Some are sort of touched through the renewal work, but are sort of primarily handled elsewhere. But nonetheless, you know, as we go through and consider program changes, it'll be good to keep these goals in mind. And so keeping the plans, or asking the plans to be accountable for health equity as well as behavioral health, plan equity across the state, focusing on whole person and building a culture of well-being, member education, addressing the needs of a diverse population, ensuring the richness of the benefit while managing cost, and then finally pursuing alternate payment models. Okay. There are no questions or comments. Let's jump to slide 8, please. This is a quick recap on the vote that was made a month ago around the Canopy renewal. Canopy EAP renews July 1st. And so it is one of the off-calendar year benefits, which is why we asked you to vote in February on this one. There was board approval to renew with Canopy for an additional 2 years. There were some enhancements that were also approved around additional options around counseling and coaching sessions for the agencies to be able to choose from. And so that sort of allows different agencies that may have higher needs or less high needs to pick and choose what model fits their employees and members. There was also the addition of the supportive solution, which is the peer-to-peer solution. And so that was approved as well. We'll be very sort of eagerly awaiting any engagement data we can get once that program goes live. So that'll be really interesting to sort of track and see how that's received, because that really is providing a service that's just not offered today. Okay, if no additional comments, I think I'll hand it over to Emery, and these next few slides really go through breaking down some trend components as well as cost drivers, which was a follow-up from the February board meeting.
Yep. Thank you, Andrew. So, I think one of the big questions that was posed during the prior meeting, last month's meeting, was really why are the coordinated care plans trending so much higher? Especially in the last couple of years, the statewide plan hasn't been increasing as much, but the coordinated care plan rates are increasing, in this case, like 8% for the Province Choice and MODA, and Kaiser's initial renewal came in at about 13%. So what we did was to kind of take a look more at the historical performance. And in this case, we in the utilization reports, we kind of take a look at the year-over-year performance. This is performance from 2016. So actually over like the last 6-7 years, how have the plans performed? The total increase is there on the left. For PEB, you've been increasing 2.8%. So, compared to that 3.4%, you've been below. And, that kind of ties into what we showed for the costs over time. You've been below the 3.4%. But if you take a look at the different plans, and they go from statewide in green, Choice is in purple in the middle, and then MODA is on I guess, pink on second from right, and then Kaiser's the far right. And Kaiser's the combined HMO and deductible plan in this case. Kaiser has had switching into the deductible plan, so there's been some lower costs as a result of people moving from the HMO to the deductible plan, and so that has impacted their overall increases. But generally, statewide has been increasing 2.5%. Choice and MODA have been increasing about 3.7 and 4.5%, so definitely higher than statewide over time. And Kaiser's at 2.5%. As I mentioned, some of it's due to switching, but so if you didn't account for switching, their trend would be higher than statewide over this time period. The plan design, as you can see, is cost share leveraging in that second bucket. Over time, it's about 0.75% additional cost, as your plan designs really haven't changed significantly over this time period. Statewide, actually the cost share leveraging, the change there is actually a bigger impact there. It's a little bit smaller for Choice, MODA, and Kaiser. But every year, about 0.5% of additional cost, 0.5% of the 3.4% is due to the plan design not changing, and so that's trend, that's cost you're going to have to account for from year to year. The center buckets, the member health risk. So over time, what is the risk score of a member? How much has it changed from year to year? And this doesn't account for people coming in and leaving. And so this health risk is the risk score, basically taking the person's claims to come up with an approximate expected cost for that patient. As you age, you would expect a couple points percent to get per year. So overall, PEB's increasing about 1.3. So there is maybe a little bit younger population coming in now in 22 versus 2016. But overall, plans are increasing between 1 and 2%, with Choice having the highest increase in risk. Kaiser's risk is about 2% as well. MODA and statewide is about 1 point. So the plans the risk of the members in those plans do change a little bit, or a little bit different per year. This is annual. So over 6 years, it's like 7-8% difference in cost between statewide and Choice due to member risk. The unit cost is kind of interesting. Senate Bill 1067 did reduce costs, so your unit cost for PEB in total decreased. For Moda, that's actually their biggest cost driver of that 3.7%. For Kaiser, you can see their unit cost actually has dropped quite a bit, at least as a portion of the overall trend. And then for utilization, it's kind of like flipped. So Kaiser's utilization has been the biggest driver of their cost. It's actually 4% due to just more services being utilized. Statewide and Moda, their utilization has been pretty flat over the years, and Choice has 2%, 1.7% of their cost is due to utilization. So
Emery,
yes.
just a quick question on Kaiser with the utilization. Is
Mhm.
it being driven by the HMO versus the deductible, or do we not know?
I'll have to go back and take a closer look at it. We did combine it. Kaiser deductible was pretty small to start out in 2016, so it's not as credible. So we wanted to combine it in this case, but we can take a closer look. As you switch over more members between the two plans, it's going to be they're going to be a little bit sicker typically. It's like you're taking a chunk of the HMO population, so we'll have to see it. We'll have to take a closer look to get at that. But it's overall, yeah, the managed care plans, at least Providence Choice and Moda, are increasing a bit more. How they're increasing is a little bit different by the plan. So it's kind of interesting. But I mean, we could dive in future reports, dive a little bit more into, where the unit costs are increasing more for Moda versus some of the other plans and why utilization, your question about utilization as well for Kaiser and Choice in this case. Next slide. Just taking a look at the categories service a little bit more quickly here. So the biggest increase is really in prescription drugs here. With Choice, they have the biggest increase, 9.4%. We do have rebates included in here. Rebates are offset against the prescription drug costs. Overall, drug costs are going up 7% over time with the rebates. Choice is the biggest, Kaiser's the lowest. All other includes mental health and lab services. So COVID tests and stuff like that would be lumped into their behavioral health, have been increasing quite a bit. So that's why all others increasing as much. But inpatient, you can see, has savings mostly due to the Senate bill with the reimbursement levels. But overall, prescription drugs is like kind of the biggest cost increases in this case over time. I guess it's not really a new story, but something to keep in mind. Next slide. And so this shows a little bit more detail on the cost drivers. So this talks about the biggest single components of that increase. The cost impacts actually straight points. So in this case for PEBB, 1.6 % per year, of the increase is due to specialty drugs. So specialty drugs is essentially eating up half of your 3.4% every year. So the cost is specialty drugs. For statewide, that does not include rebates. So rebates is a separate category. So that's not actually included here. But you can see the top line across pretty much all of the plans except for Kaiser, specialty drugs. So that is an area where you may want to start really taking a hard line look at programs to potentially impact specialty drugs and mitigate that cost impact. The second largest area of increase is mental health services. So this might be considered pretty good utilization. It's the second biggest across all of the plans except for Kaiser, and that's the biggest impact for Kaiser. And so for second biggest for Kaiser, specialty drugs. So the top two categories are essentially the same across the board. Then we get to the lab outpatient, which is COVID. So I'm not going to worry too much about that. Professional specialty drugs is increasing, but not nearly as much as that in the PBM. And then you can see some of the other categories down below, which have a little bit more of a cost impact. But, one area, actually, is it listed in here? It's not really, but emergency room, I think, has been an issue, at least recently. There was a drop due to COVID, but now it's kind of come back. So that was something that we had talked about in the utilization report. It's not a big cost driver over this time period, but it has been one that's been impacted over the last couple of years. But that's another area of potential concern. But I don't know if this gives you ideas about, programs that might be impactful to help bend the cost curve. Any questions? Okay, moving on. Andrew. Oh, do you want me to handle this?
Sure.
Okay, this shows the plans by line of coverage. The admin fee increases there in the third column. Those actually, I don't think any of those changed from round one. So the admin fee increases, we're still talking to the plans about the admin fee increases, but the preliminary rate increase there in column 4 is updated for the latest round of claims. So for statewide, the cost actually barely increased. I think it was like 3.76 or 3.7% last month. It's now 3.8, but Providence Choice did drop a bit to 7.8% increase. Kaiser's remains the same at the 13.5. We're still talking to them about that. And then MODA, the rate increase did drop to 7.9% due to better claims experience. Delta Dental of Oregon's 2.2, VSP's minus 0.2. And then Delta Dental and Kaiser, those are the fully insured plans. They currently have proposed a rate pass standard. There's no plan change there. And so you can see the total projected premiums about 1.2 billion there on the right. So what does this mean on the composite rate? The next slide. Actually, before we get to that, preliminary premiums. So those rate increases, what we talked about in the prior meetings, like, is there going to be a low cost plan? At least, based on the 10%. And John, you clarified to us that, it's 10% below the highest cost plan. And that's, yeah. So statewide is actually not going to be the lowest or the highest cost plan based on the current premium rates. It's actually going to be Kaiser HMO. So we do show below the difference to statewide, but if we place Kaiser HMO with a 13.5% increase, the MODA and Providence Choice plans are both 10% below the Kaiser HMO. The Kaiser deductible plan, however, is not. So in that case, if Kaiser HMO stays at the 13.5% rate increase, then MODA and Providence Choice would have the 1% contributions for those who are subject to it, and not the 5%. But Kaiser deductible would go up to 5%. So yeah, so there would be a little bit of a change. There would probably, members might, having a higher increase or increased contributions is not ideal. So just wanted to bring this up to show the board where the premium rates are. Any questions or comments?
Thanks, Emery. And I know you'll bring this information back again in April since it will shift, right? We'll get the
Yes.
final rates.
Yeah, that's the anticipation. Yes, there's probably be a little bit of changes. Okay, moving on. So the composite rate, as Andrew mentioned, the composite rate has gotten a little bit better. So down there at the bottom, we're projecting a 4.1% change compared to the 3.4% limitation. So what's the delta? The delta is about $8 million. I think we said it was 16 million in the prior month. Prior board meeting, it's shrunk in half, so about $8 million. So less of a change or deficit spend, however the board decides, but we're now looking at an $8 million delta difference.
And Emery, that's being driven by a couple of months of favorable claims experience, which got swept up in the latest cost projection. Is that accurate?
Yes, yes. The Choice and MODA plans did have a little bit better experience, lower claims coming in. So the rates for those plans did drop a little bit in this case. Okay. Next slide.
So thank you, Emery. For this section, I'm going to hand it off to my colleague, Sally Hill, who is our renewal workstream leader. On slide 17, Maggie, this is an overview of the ASO rates. As Emery mentioned, this one is not updated from round one, but we're continuing to work with the carriers on these. So I don't know, Sally, if you had any additional commentary you wanted to add on this one or not, or if we want to jump ahead.
No, I didn't.
Okay.
Yeah, nope. Okay. So we're revisiting the options that we presented last time. And the first one is the consideration to add massage therapy to the statewide plan. And this was a recommendation brought forward by Providence to create some benefit parity between the choice and the statewide plan. So they recommended this 50% coinsurance up to the $1,000 annual benefit limit. And this plan design would allow members to see any licensed massage therapist. If they see one in the network, they benefit from the network arrangement, but they don't have to, and they'll get the same benefit. One of our follow-ups with Providence was to ask about utilization management to ensure that these are medically necessary. Currently, that's not occurring. It is a service they could provide, which would provide some savings. So you can see that we're estimating the cost for this change to be about 3.4 million. And this is just for the statewide plan, with an estimated 10% cost reduction if they were screening for medical necessity. And so I think this also, Andrew, this ties back to, and Emery ties back also to the, when we looked at the premium differentials between the plans, this would add cost, obviously, to the statewide plan and increase those premiums slightly. But we wanted to have some discussion around this topic. And Andrew, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to jump in and comment on.
So if you think about the dynamic that Emery talked about with the contributions and the 10% delta that's required in the contracts for that 1% contribution for some employees. So right now the Kaiser HMO is the most expensive plan, but if this time next month the statewide plan is the most expensive, approving this benefit would actually likely help to achieve that 10% delta if the statewide plan is the highest cost plan, if that makes sense. And so, historically, my understanding is this was excluded as an incentive to drive folks into the choice plan. But I think there are arguments to be made around adding this for the statewide plan. It's obviously going to improve member experience, and if we add medical necessity to it, that sort of helps ensure appropriate utilization of the benefit. But because of that sort of contribution dynamic, I think it requires a little bit of discussion. And given that we're trying to solve for an $8 million delta, this would be an additional cost. And so it'd be an additional cost, but potentially could help ensure less disruption for current members from a contributions perspective who are enrolled in the non-statewide plans. And I don't feel like I'm doing a great job of making that dynamic clear. So I guess let me pause there and see if anyone has questions.
So I do understand what you're saying, and I just want to make sure I'm following the slide. So it would be 3.4 million without the medical leave necessary part of it. So it would be closer to 3 million or 3.1 million.
Correct.
If there was, if medical necessity was part of it. Is that right? And then the dark blue on the top, that plus 26 million or plus 13.3 million, that's for all of the changes we're looking at combined on the all the next 3 slides, right? So
No,
we're not really, yeah, you want to explain that?
Oh, sorry, Siobhan, I didn't mean to interrupt you there. Yeah, I think those are status quo increases. Is that right, Emery? So those do not incorporate any proposed changes.
Yeah, those
incremental
don't.
costs.
So
Oh, got it. Okay, that's helpful.
Yeah.
So any of these changes would be on top of what is listed at the top. Okay,
Yes,
I just wanted to
that's
make sure I was
Yep.
following.
Yeah, in
Just-
other versions of these presentations, we included a row at the bottom, just sort of in an attempt to add up any incremental costs or any decrements in it. We determined it was kind of confusing because we're not necessarily recommending all these changes, and so we kind of just got rid of that row. But
So I know, I'm just curious, Greg, Sean, Chicky, if you have any thoughts on the massage therapy benefit for statewide?
Still over.
Say again.
Go ahead. I said I'm still just trying to, piece it together.
I think
I'll say this. Uh, being part of a large hiring effort in an agency right now, there is a lot of discussion about our benefits needing to be competitive because we're having a hell of a time being competitive in general on hiring. So, you know, our benefits are good, but actually they're not. The information I get, and we're trying to hire a whole bunch of IT people, and like our benefits are not actually that great compared to what Intel has and such. As far as like extra bells and whistles that they have. So we're losing a lot of candidates just because we can't pay as much, and benefits are in some of those tech jobs are not actually as competitive as you think. So with that in mind, I think it's useful for us to talk about some I think there is a cost to the state to only ever talk about austerity and like cutting things and not adding things because other employers of a certain stature are adding things and it is a competitive environment. So that being said, it doesn't seem like we're in a position to be able to add stuff at this point, given the renewal slides we just saw. So that's pretty unfortunate because we're having a heck of a time competing for like I just lost 2 people that I was trying to hire are part of a team that was hiring, and because they got better offers. So that puts the state in a pretty tough position that our carriers can't control costs because we need to be able to be competitive. So it seems like a great conversation to have, massage therapy benefit, but I don't see how that's plausible in our current renewal discussion. I don't know. Maybe I'm missing something.
No, I appreciate that. And my brother for years was a licensed massage therapist, and he ran a business. And the benefits that I saw, just him giving individuals that didn't have to have large surgeries, that didn't have to go do certain things. I mean, if it's done correctly, it actually does save money on the back end for insurance. And I'm positive somewhere it can be proven. But as you say, with where we are right now, adding things might be a rough piece to do. So, but something that I think would add to our package and make us more, anything we can add always makes us a better look, of course. And I appreciate you bringing that up because it is true.
Thanks, Greg and Sean. Yeah, Chicky, go ahead.
Do we have any survey data from our members in terms of preference for massage therapy as part of their benefit package, or how often they use it?
Ali, I don't know if Ali was able to get on yet, or maybe this is something that Cindy or Damien might be able to respond to. Damien?
I
Or
was hoping
Cindy?
Cindy would jump.
She
handle
is. I
the
see.
survey.
I see Cindy here. Cindy, go ahead.
I not that I am aware of, but I think it's easy enough for us to pull together. We haven't looked at it specifically, I don't think.
So thank you for the response. I'm at this position where I would love to add. I would love for us to consider adding the benefit, but if there's no demand, then that's where the supply versus demand conversation comes into play. However, there's also part of me that wonders if we don't offer massage therapy, and I just don't know if there's studies out there, the benefits of massage therapy versus going the medicated route, right? If people encounter pain, instead of being able to get massage therapy, their doctors prescribe them with medicines. And we know that pharma costs are also going high. So trying to weigh which one is better without having enough data, for me, I'm at this point where on paper, it sounds great. The cost, of course, does not sound great because it means we have to pay more. But the long-term benefits for our members, I think, might be worth the risk. But that's just a discussion point for me at this time.
And can I add something too? In the back of this presentation, we have plan design changes that were made in the past, and almost all the other plans do cover massage therapy. So I think the only one that doesn't is the Kaiser part-time plan. It does not cover it, or at least it didn't as of 2022. I don't have the 2023. So just for another data point.
Yeah, that's helpful. Go ahead, Cindy.
I think that this was used as a differentiator, if I remember correctly, that we were trying to steer people into the choice plan out and away from statewide. And I think that was one of the differentiators between the two, if I remember correctly. So
I remember that discussion too. And I think to the point of member utilization, we could look at data in terms of how many of our members are utilizing massage therapy in the plans that offer them, right? I mean, that would give us information. And I don't know whether we would be, I mean, is it possible that we could get the data on if there's a higher percentage of people utilizing medication for issues versus massage, like if the drug use is higher for the statewide plan? I mean, I don't know if we can get at that because nothing is ever apples to apples exactly, but I don't know if we can look at existing utilization in our plans to get at any of that.
We can try. I don't know if I won't guarantee I can find it, but we can definitely take a look at that.
And the other piece, and I'm just going to add this in, and this is just anecdotal and was coming from some of our members, state workers, who were saying that in the metro area, the Portland metro area, it's hard to find massage therapists that would cover based on the rates that PEBB was paying. So that was also an issue for those who have the coverage. It can be challenging to find a massage therapist. So. And that's a different discussion, and that's not what's before us here. And I'm glad we don't have to make decisions today since we're not yet exactly where we are with the final rate. So I know today we would be solving for 8 million. I don't know what we're going to be having to solve for a month from now.
Yeah, it's a good point, Siobhan. What we could do is pull some of that utilization data and table it once we understand what that delta is a month from now. See if there's a way to incorporate it and if there's value there.
Appreciate the thoughts from board members. And I believe Andy Fultz has joined us now too. So just want to recognize that I think she's here as well. Yes, hello. I think we should move on to the next pieces, considerations that are out here. Go ahead, Andrew.
Oh, sorry, Maggie, if you could actually just back up one slide. There's one more item on this one. So I don't know, Sally, if you want to take this one or if you want me to kick it off. I know Dr. Chwang has some comments as well.
Excuse me. I was just going to reintroduce it and
Sure.
provide the background around the request. So this is something that Providence also recommended. They feel that they did a survey of members who are actually leaving Providence altogether, and this was something that they heard on the survey of these exiting members, and discussing some frustration with the challenges of having the referrals. That said, my understanding though is that this is really an administrative change to not continue to require the medical homes to actually submit referrals, although the reality is their practice pattern would be to be referring members because they would continue to coordinate the care. There just wouldn't be that formal referral administrative requirement within the health plan. But we have Dr. Chwang here to, I think, add more context around this. So.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I think there's still a useful process for primary cares to understand the context of the referral, especially when there's a excess demand situation with specialty access and care to basically provide the clinical rationale for getting that person in. My understanding is changing the mindset from a restrictive or gatekeeping focus to more of a facilitative process. And in doing so, that ideally should help with the member experience, because left on their own, it's still hard for a layperson to navigate, say the right things, and get that appointment, and figure out if a delay in that access is a clinical detriment or not. So I think that's something worth considering. And I believe, and I read a note that with the issue with access, even on the patient-centered medical home, the process of getting a bridge team, so they can't get in face to face, but the importance or the clinical issue is of timeliness. That in that context, I think they're addressing the process challenge that is before them.
Any questions from board members? This would be, a not insignificant change. See, Cash, you had a comment as well. Oh, sorry, never mind, Cash. You're commenting on the utilization question. So on the MOTA plan, there's not currently this requirement for a specialist referral. Another thing to keep in mind as we sort of weigh this one. And I think that Providence is, and this, I don't know if this was commented on or not, and maybe I missed it, but Providence is planning on removing this requirement for the rest of their book who have similar plans with these primary care medical homes.
I don't have any additional questions. This is Chicky. It sounds like a great idea to me.
Agreed.
Okay. Right.
Yeah. If we have, and if, like she was saying, there's something that kind of clicked in my head. If we have individuals leaving our paying in 5%, we're trying to save money. If we have individuals leaving our pay into 5% plan because of this to go to our pay in 1% plan, then not only do the medical aspects of this maybe help us on the back end, but also if people want to stay in that plan because this comes available, and I'm not saying they need to spend more money, but that money is placed better in for us in the long run, we may actually save some more money as well. Just, I don't know if that makes sense, but
Yeah, I get what you're saying. A little bit of an offset, Greg.
yeah.
Okay. Any other comments or questions on this one before we move on to the next slide? The next slide, please, Maggie.
Okay.
Sally?
Yep. So the next one is all these we did discuss last time, but revisiting the anti-obesity medication exclusion. And we have added the cost impacts. We believe there's likely to be cost impact in years 1 and 2, and estimate some savings in year 3 if this was added. This is of interest because this provides sort of a continuum of care for people who are who want to lose weight, because you have Weight Watchers, you cover bariatric surgeries. This would be another method to support your members. But we are recommending deferring and just evaluating for 2025 to spend a little more time looking at this in terms of the cost impact and the services.
Yeah, and so trying to understand the costs is a little bit of a challenge. Obviously, it depends on what eligibility criteria are put in place, and there are these third-party vendors who do health coaching and drug tapering for these GLP-1 drugs, these weight loss drugs. We've gotten some cost estimates from them as well. We think it's what they provided is a little bit looking through you know, rose-colored glasses. And so, you know, based on everything that we've gotten from a cost perspective, we ultimately think there likely is a cost in the first couple of years. And so the strategy, the potential strategy to defer and evaluate further from a clinical member perspective, sort of aligns with what we're going to recommend on Weight Watchers and WebMD, which is to have a similar, not to defer on those ones, but to evaluate them and understand if they're still providing value, because they also sit along this continuum of sort of metabolic disorders, right? And there's sort of a spectrum of different services or continuum, with sort of the Weight Watchers being at the sort of lower acuity side, and then moving up, there's pre-diabetes solutions with Omada Livongo, there's Virta for folks who already have type 2, there's potentially the weight loss drugs, which is excluded today, there's bariatric surgery, which is covered today. And so given that it's not sort of a clear picture from a cost perspective as well as from you know, a member outcomes perspective, we were suggesting to sort of take a closer clinical and member analysis perspective for the sort of balance of 2023 looking towards 2025. I don't know, Dr. Trang, I know you are sort of very steeped in this topic. I don't know if there's anything you'd add that we haven't commented on so far.
The only thing I would add is because of the crossover benefit of this medication and because of the very strong social media push, everybody knows about these medications. There are sort of the potential risk of using off-labeled medications that are covered for type 2 diabetes. So my only suggestion would be to confirm and check with our carriers just to make sure we have prior auth that will be tight on the indication just for type 2 diabetes and nothing else.
This is a topic where there have been some member comments that have been submitted. So I'll put that out there as well, just for general awareness. Sean, I see you came off mute. Did you have a comment you wanted to make?
Yeah. So I don't necessarily disagree with the idea of deferring, but just for the sake of conversation. So as I recall, last time we talked about this, the reason why we're even discussing it is because there's a new class of drugs that are that appear to be quite a bit safer than the old style weight loss drugs, less impact on cardiovascular health and so on. Is this correct, as far as it seems at this point?
It's a combination, so there's always side effect risk, but they are they're different, they're manageable, and more importantly, they achieve that meaningful improvement in weight reduction. So rather than just the 1 or 2%, they actually get to that 10 to 15 that really do reduce the onset of diabetes or the development of cardiovascular diseases, which are your cost drivers down the road.
Okay. And Dr. Trang, these drugs are not new per se, right? They're on the formulary for folks with diabetes today. So is that right?
The ingredient is, they branded it differently, and that's why
Okay.
if we're not covering it, consumers will figure a way, because social media is teaching them to say the right thing and try to get it covered under diabetes indication, even though that medication, the brand, isn't indicated for that. So good example, Wegovy, same product for weight loss. Ozempic, same product, but for diabetes. So if we don't cover Wegovy, then they'll say, well, say the right things and we'll get it covered under, yeah.
So, is it fair to compare the intervention of this medication with bariatric surgery? In other words, that there might be a same person that's looking at like either this or that. Is that fair?
The treatment criterias and the recommendation for approval of coverage is very similar because it's primarily targeting the higher risk individuals. So where there's
Yeah.
most value to the patient as well as risk reduction, it is that same group. So it could be one or the other as valid alternative or what we want to call more aggressive treatment options. Yes.
Okay. So my thought, and as I say, like I'm not necessarily disagreeing with the idea of deferring, but given that we currently cover bariatric surgery, which has its own known risks, if that, just speaking of that group, where it's like either this or that, like they're at that point where we are actually seriously considering covering surgery for a person. It seems like the risk management of those two things would be at least plausible, that that the medication might be a less you know a lower risk in some ways, maybe that it anyway. So I guess my thought is just like there's an option of like covering it for that group only, so that there's another option from surgery and seeing how that goes for a little bit. Just given that surgery is such a serious option anyway. That if we avoided a surgery with medication, given that we already cover the surgery, that might be something to think about. That's all I was thinking.
Right. Basically, an alternative treatment option for clinical decision and discussion with the patient. Yep.
So Sean, if I understand what you're saying, basically in the beginning, to get this on board and to see how it would work or how it would help affect, we would put it in place for those that are in that category that are looking at that, not just everyone at a whim like me that decides tomorrow I want to be diabetic and lose weight.
Good,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
As a way of kind of observing an initial experience
Right,
of costs
right,
and such.
Right,
It's
to
just
see
like
what
this,
it's actually do.
yeah,
I get
exactly.
that. That's actually good.
Because they're already looking at surgery anyway, which
Right.
like
Yeah, they're in that category. Like that. Yeah, they're in that category. That's a great idea.
Yeah. Right.
Instead of just me going into my doctor and saying, "Hey, I heard about this new thing. Can I be pre-diabetic and get this drug so I can lose weight?" Yeah, that's not what we want.
And
Is
both should
that-
not be viewed as a fix. So they should still also in parallel address, those modifiable behavior and choices around nutrition and physical activity as well.
Exactly.
And
And
what? Oh, go
sorry,
ahead.
Siobhan.
No,
Well,
go
I
ahead.
was just gonna say, was just presumably, hopefully, I am counting on it that by the time someone gets to the point of actually discussing bariatric surgery, that our managed care mechanisms in our plans are already engaging this person on lifestyle behavior changes as well. I'm hoping that no one just says, yeah, have some surgery without having some attempt at managed care related to behavior change and nutrition, etc. So that presumably, I'm presuming that that group is already engaged by our plans on such things by the time they get to that point.
I was just going to ask when you shared this information with us a month ago. You said did you say something about folks with a particular BMI that would also be eligible for the bariatric surgery? I mean, I'm just wondering if you bring that information back in April for what that might look like cost-wise.
Sure, yeah, I think we, if I'm remembering right, it suggested maybe BMI of 40 or greater. To sort of do this sort of staged rollout where there's an initial cohort in year one, which is really the higher risk folks. And so we can bring that forward again and talk about it some more in April.
I appreciate that. And I also just wanted to share, we did have a discussion around this in the health equity work group too. And it is so new that the work group hasn't done a full analysis of what this would look like and what this would mean for members. And, just want to be really mindful about how something rolls out, because if we roll something out and then would have to pull something back, that would be really challenging as well.
And so maybe at this point, it's time to sort of put it through the tool, put GLP-1 exclusion through the health equity screening tool. So we've got those considerations as well for April.
I think that would be helpful. Thank you.
Okay, great. Okay.
Sorry. Are you ready for the next topic? You think? Looking for Andrew to nod,
Yeah.
yes?
Sounds good. Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry. Yep.
So the next one we also did discuss last time, and this is a recommended change in utilization management. It was presented to the board back in 2019. It's specific to physical therapy. It's the EVACORP program, and what it would do is just manage those physical therapy visits. Members would have access to 12 visits up front, and then there'd be a medical necessity review to confirm appropriateness of care after that. I think they found in looking at their data, that's really that 12 visit point is where people are generally have pretty much utilized all they need, and they've made the progress. And so it's a good point to do a review if they need additional services. And so it's really just ensuring the appropriateness of utilization, and also ensures that there's parity in the way the benefits are being administered in terms of mental health parity, aligning all of that utilization management. And so there's an estimated cost savings to this program of a little over $1 million, and we're recommending accepting it for 2024. Any questions about that?
This is tricky. Quick question. I'm looking at your first bullet. It says implementation was delayed until further provider education. When was implementation implemented then?
Well, it was recommended and it was approved for 2019, and then it was pulled back because Providence wanted to make sure that there was adequate provider education, and that they were rolling it out, I think, for the rest of their book of business, and making sure that they had all the kinks worked out and they had good member experience. And so now they feel comfortable bringing this back to PEBB for consideration. Does that help?
Yes. So we're saying we're looking to implement now.
Yes,
well, at least 2024. Okay.
Yeah, 2024. Exactly.
And so just so I'm understanding clearly, so the cost savings would be realized because some people would be having less physical therapy. Is that correct?
I think that's correct.
Okay.
This is tricky. I don't have additional questions. It sounds fairly straightforward, and I support the recommendation.
Anybody else have any questions or comments on that one? Okay, so I think we can move, Maggie, to the next slide. The RX Savings Solutions Program, this is a discount program that Providence is bringing forward for the members of both plans. And essentially, this is a voluntary program. What they will be doing is actually scrubbing their data. They will identify people who would benefit from this program. It's things like maybe changing from tablet to capsule or different drug strengths. They would make sure they communicate with the member, let them know what the options are. If there was a need for a new script, they'd reach out to the physician to facilitate that. And so they've provided some estimated savings for year one, and then after 24 months, after 36 months, which you can see. But the nice about the program is it's voluntary, so members would not be forced into this. They would just be offered this opportunity to save money. And if they decided to take advantage of it, they win and the plan wins because the plan would save money as well. And Providence is anticipating rolling this out for their commercial book of business later this year, early 2024. So they'll be doing it across all of their plans. And And we're recommending accepting it. Since it's a benefit to the member. Have any questions about it?
So how do they save money? Are they're looking at like going to a different pharmacy for a particular drug or something? Is that how it works?
It's really more about the drug, whether there are other drug options. So like,
Oh.
for example, so if a tablet moving to a capsule is less expensive,
Okay.
if, the drug strength could be adjusted, things like that. Or if there's a different drug option that might be more cost effective, but equally effective in terms of treating their condition. So.
And would this program works with the member or the prescribing physician?
I think it starts with the member. It depends on the prescription. So if it's as simple as some simple changes that can be made without involving the physician, that's what they'll do. But if it would require a new prescription, then they would reach out to the physician.
So just to make sure I'm tracking correctly, I go to the doctor, I get a prescription, I go to my pharmacy, I get my first batch of medicines. The program will review what I signed up for or what I got, and then we'll make recommendations for the second or third or so on and so forth round of potential medication.
Correct. So if they see an opportunity where you could save money by making an adjustment to the prescription, they will do that.
I'm curious about the timeline for that outreach, the turnaround time. It sounds great to me. I'm just hoping that the outreach will be done in a timely manner where the actual member and the member will benefit from it.
I can't answer that question. That's a question I can't answer, but we can take it back and follow up with information on that.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Okay.
I mean, presumably these would, they would be targeting drugs that have a presumption of ongoing use, right? I mean, it would be sort of pointless if they looked at like an antibiotic that has a 14-day regimen and then they're like, well, the next time you get prescribed antibiotics in 7 years, you should do this one, as opposed to like, I don't know, diabetes medication or something that's like ongoing. Is that the idea?
I think that's the idea. It's really more the maintenance medication, something somebody's taking on an ongoing basis where there's an opportunity for some savings. You're right. A one-time script is not going to make a lot of sense.
I have one more question. In the same theme as barriers to administration, I'm a little concerned about the outreach to physician will occur if a new script is required, because that could be a barrier to getting in a timely fashion. And I don't know what reassurances we could get that if they don't hear from a physician, you will still get your original prescription type of conversation.
I think someone just made a comment about this in the notes. So the note is, so this could be a lower cost drug combining two drugs into one, switching to mail order or lower cost channel. The RX Savings Solution team will help the member get a new prescription if needed and requested by the member. The member can also ask their provider. And then once an opportunity is identified, the member is notified via email, mail, or text, if enrolled in text, of the opportunity. And then they'll log into the tool or can call RX Savings and can choose to take the recommended change or not. Does that additional explanation help?
This is Heidi from Providence. Can I just provide a little bit more background on this?
Oh,
Happy
sure,
to
please
jump in
do.
and do that.
Please do,
The
Heidi.
really nice thing about the tool is it's really a nice concierge service. So if the member chooses when they log in that they want to make the change, depending on what the savings might be, what the actual change might be, they have two options. They can either just take that to their provider directly, or what's most likely to happen is they can push a button to send that to the RX Savings Solutions team. That team will then directly reach out to the provider's office via fax initially to ask for a new request. There's a really nice, it's almost looking like a new prescription that they send that the provider just needs to accept and sign and then send into the pharmacy of choice. It could be the same pharmacy. It could be a mail order pharmacy if the savings is a result of changing to mail order. There are several different scenarios. That change typically occurs within, they tell us, 24 to 72 hours, so it's pretty quick. And the RX Savings Solutions team will close the loop with the member. So they'll either say, yes, we were able to connect with your doctor. This prescription has now been sent to this pharmacy. You can pick it up. Or your provider didn't accept the change. Please discuss with them and follow up. So there's a pretty good wraparound service to actually help make that change happen, because that's often where people get stuck, right? Is following through on those things. So the team does that, and we then monitor the outcomes associated with that. And we've also spoken with our providers about this, so they're aware of the program. We'll be doing some work with them directly, especially the providers within Providence, to help facilitate some of these changes and make sure that the members are benefiting from the service.
Yeah, and in the long run, this could save me over the years that I've taken my cholesterol medication that I pay $10 for. If I decide to finally do mail order because I've never heard about it or don't know how to do it, and now it goes to 3 or 4 months for $10, it not only saves the plan, but it saves me as an individual that money. So it's something that, you know, people might actually use, if I'm correct.
Yep, that's a great example. Switching to mail order is a great cost saving opportunity, but not easy to do
Heidi,
sometimes.
Yeah. Is there a back side of this program to the providers? You know, like if they identify this provider and they loop back with them and be like, the next time you prescribe this medicine, which it seems like you do a lot, you could just prescribe it this way and it would save this. You know what I mean? Like a little provider education on
Yeah.
that sort of thing.
Yeah, so that's happening a little bit today through, I think we've brought to you before, the provider real-time benefit tool, where providers at the point of prescribing are presented with these similar opportunities. So now we're essentially providing the same information, but to the member, and then actually proactively notifying the member of savings if they're on something that, maybe they've been on for a long time and the provider, just hasn't looked to see if there's something more cost advantageous to the member. So yeah, providers are getting the same kind of detailing through, again, that provider EMR. If they have that functionality turned on, we have it turned on our end. So we're working with a lot of our provider groups to get that going, but it's, and we have actually pretty good utilization of it. So there is connectivity and synchronization there for sure. But there's still savings to be had, for sure. Think of like even combining 2 generic medications into one, blood pressure medication or blood pressure cholesterol medication, as an example. There's some brand to generic switches that can occur. So there's still kind of some leakage out there that members can save from this kind of service.
And I believe
we are, I guess, to follow it through, will also be getting provider reporting, so we can look for providers at the provider level, what members have savings opportunities, and we can share that back with them through our quality work or our provider meetings that we have, to let them know that they can just, here's a list of your patients who have an opportunity, maybe you can discuss it with them at their next visit or flag their chart for follow-up or something.
I think a small follow-up to that is, and not giving away my medical history, but I take the cholesterol medicine and I have for years. And anytime I need it, the pharmacist just faxes my doctor and he just faxes the same thing back. So, he's not looking at something that maybe in the last year, because I've taken it for a couple of years, that's actually out on the market that's new, that might be different, that would do the same thing, that would be cheaper for me and for our company, or for PEBB. He's just, yep, the script comes in, yep, Greg needs that, and he just faxes it back. And when you were saying that, that's what I was thinking, that those long-term meds, we have new stuff that gets to market all the time. The doctor really might not be thinking of that as an old patient, not seeing him, just getting that script renewed.
Right, do you want to keep walking us through? I know we have several more considerations to look at.
Through still. So the next one is the that exclusion on this plan, on the plans. And, you know, they have multiple uses. They're relatively low cost. This is kind of a health equity concern, and there's been a member complaint. There's minimal cost impact, so we're recommending accepting. Any questions? And then
No.
we'll move on. Okay.
I was just going to say makes sense.
Okay, so we'll move on. Maggie, she's still there. Okay, now we're to MODA. The Copay Max Plus program. This is the coupon program similar to what Providence has currently. And so essentially what this will do is if a member is utilizing a pharmacy coupon through the manufacturer, these are specialty type medications, so higher cost drugs. The plan will take advantage of that coupon and the member will pay the cost sharing to reflect their actual out-of-pocket expense. Whereas currently they are getting credit for the copay, but they're not paying the copay. So this will reflect the copay they're paying through that coupon program. And so there's an estimate of savings to the plan of about 2.4 million net of the administrative fee. And we recommend going forward with this. And this would be then consistent also with the Providence, which implemented that this year, a very similar program. The next one is language services. This is for medical and dental. And please interrupt me. I'm going to talk fast since we do have a lot of slides to go through. And this is basically, this is providing interpretive services for members who are in the physician office. Currently, MODA provides us some customer service, but the physician offices don't have the ability to bill for those services. This would add this to the plan and give them that additional coverage to that through the plan for the members. We estimate no cost impact and we recommend accepting it. And then the last one on this slide is VERTA, which was mentioned earlier. This program is already was implemented last year on the Providence plan. This is a diabetes reversal program. So this is using diet with the goal of reversing diabetes, and it uses diet and some support. So there's coaching, there's physician support. And so there's a year one estimate of some cost to the plan of about 25,000 annually, but then by year two, you start to see savings as members are enrolled in the program and make progress in the program. And we're recommending accepting this one as well.
And that one doesn't really impact overall rate because the cost is so low. Is that right? Okay, thanks.
And this then gives
Yeah, as a
consistency.
portion of the overall cost impact, yeah, it's not going to be huge. If the Copay Max program is implemented, that would save more than these plans would cost.
So any questions before we move on to the next slide? Since we have a few more to go through. Hey, Maggie. So the first couple are programs that MODA brought forward, a nutrition support program and then flex funds to support members. The first one for healthy eating and the second one just connecting them with community resources. We do not have cost impact for either one of these. We do recommend declining both of these because these would be taxable benefits to the member. They would not be allowed under the IRS tax code as a non-taxable benefit. The third one is what we've already discussed under Providence, and it's also one that we recommend adding to the MODA plan. This is the sexual dysfunction drugs, and this has just a minimal cost impact of about 0.1%. And then the anti-obesity medication exclusion, we have the same recommendation as we did on Providence, which is to defer and evaluate for 2025. And I'm sorry, I'm talking really fast. If you have questions, please interrupt me. Otherwise, we'll move to the next. These next two are administrative changes. We recommend accepting both of them. One is really a contractual issue for MODA in terms of no longer reimbursing for people who utilize the CVS pharmacy network, but there's no one who would be impacted by this change. And then out of area dependence, it's just adding that the children who reside outside the service area will be assigned a primary network. And then to ensure that they receive in-network benefits. And we recommend accepting both of these. And then we move on from those.
And
this one,
and one other thing, I'm just going to interrupt. So Sean put a question into the chat around just going back to the pharmacy copay. It was their Copay Max Plus program. If somebody could respond in the chat, and we'll continue moving, and then we can circle back if no one's able to respond. Thanks, Maggie. Go ahead.
So Behavioral Health 360 is another program that MODA is introducing and are recommending. And this is an integrated behavioral health solution. So this is really a program. So you have the MODA 360. This is an add-on to that to provide additional support to members who need behavioral health resources. And I have Christy here who can actually speak more to this program, I think. And I think I'll pull her in. Hi, Christy. If you want to.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, so we have the MODA Behavioral Health 360 program. Is a program that is connecting members to behavioral health and really help navigating them through that process of getting connected with a mental health provider. And we know that access is important, and sometimes navigating the system is challenging. A couple things with the program just to note is that the program has behavioral health champions that are unlicensed, who are the primary contact of the program from a telephonic position. They then have also subcontractors as part of this program. Spring Health, which is a digital provider of behavioral health care. There is also Gemini, which is for autism spectrum disorder for children, and then also coaching support for parents. And then there is also Hazelden Betty Ford, which is a best-in-class substance use disorder facility and program. A couple things was just that with the, I know it's been in place for a few months with other, other members. And so it shows that the Spring Health component of the program is really what's bringing some value as far as the access time to care. But outside of the Spring Health program, the time to access care is hard to get at due to the loss of one of the subcontractors that was proposed initially, which was Tritium. That was really going to add for that online scheduling capabilities and some other digital capabilities that allowed for providers to access and have their schedules online. So outside of the Spring Health program, there is about a 2-week, I think, is about what the access time is for counseling. So those were kind of the top 3 areas just to note is, again, is that Spring Health, it seems, is really providing the access point to the program. While there were about, some of the folks are accessing through the behavioral health champions telephonically, there is also a great portion of members that are from OEB that are accessing straight digitally to Spring Health and getting access that way. Again, the behavioral health champions are not licensed, so best practice would be to have licensed clinicians answering those phones for mental health concerns, and then that the Tritium platform is no longer part of the program offering some of that technology benefit, that would be there.
So this is something that came up in the health equity meeting recently, and OEB was there. OEB is currently using behavioral health MODA, the Behavioral Health 360. And the piece that I'm wondering about is why Spring Health is just restricted to the behavioral health champions, and why MODA isn't offering that to PEBB members already, knowing that behavioral health is one of the top areas where our members need additional services. So I'm wondering if MODA can speak to that, because it seems, my understanding is accessing that network, Spring Health, is only an option through this program.
Yeah, I can provide some additional details on that. And you're correct that Spring Health is a part of the behavioral health program. So groups can decide if they want to offer it to their members or not. I do want to clarify, Spring Health is not just available through the behavioral health champions. There are other ways to access Spring Health as well. For example, another large statewide government account has the behavioral health program, and members can access Spring Health through a variety of different ways. The behavioral health champions definitely help members get to Spring Health, as well as other behavioral health providers in our network. So when a member reaches out to a behavioral health champion, they do a little assessment with the member and then helps determine the right level or point of care. Spring Health may be that point of care, but it may also be a provider that's in our current network as well. But you're right, a group would have to decide that they wanted to have Spring Health in the behavioral health program in order to offer it to members. Does that help answer your question, Siobhan?
I believe so, so what you're saying is essentially PEBB has opted not to have Spring Health as part of the network?
Yeah, so Spring Health is like a point solution. So when we offer point solutions to groups, the groups decide if they want to take that or not. It's not, we wouldn't be able to just add it into the plan because there are different costs associated with that. So then groups would get to review and decide if that's something that they want to offer or not.
Okay.
Yes, this is Dan Thoma. I'm the Director of Behavioral Health. I can add a little bit more color onto that.
Thanks, Dan.
So yeah, Spring Health is really, it's part of the solution, but it's not a solution unto itself. And so what we did was we created a program that we believe addresses the entire behavioral health needs. And like Erica said, there's a platform fee that goes with Spring Health. So it's not just a provider network, but and it's an important piece of the Behavioral Health 360 program. But these also components, including the champion, these other components, including the champions, are super important pieces of that. For example, for a member who decides that Spring Health isn't the right fit for them, maybe because they really want in-person services or they have a younger child, the behavioral health champion then is going to help that person find the appropriate provider and follow up with that member to ensure that those services are meeting that person's needs. And the access time is quite a bit longer because these are the more difficult situations to help people with. So the champions can route people to Spring Health if that's going to meet their needs, and they can get in very quickly. But if they have more complex needs or for whatever reason that's not going to work for them, then the champion goes to our network and starts pounding the pavement, basically looking for providers that are going to be able to get that person in quickly and also have the appropriate clinical specialty.
And then Dan, can you also talk about the follow-up that the behavioral health champions do after a visit with the provider as well?
Absolutely. This is, I think, one of the really key pieces of the behavioral health champion role is that they schedule 2 follow-ups with the member. One, after that first appointment, make sure they got connected to the member, make sure the appointment happened, and also make sure that the member feels like it was a good fit. Because if it's not, what people will tend to do is drop out at that point and not get the benefit of services. But with that follow-up, we're able to then say, okay, well, if that wasn't a good fit for you, let's try something else and help them get connected to something else. And then second follow-up, 4 to 6 weeks out, at which point the member should be seeing clinical improvement as a result of the treatment. So the champion follows up with them at that point again to see if treatment is on track. If it's not on track, then we're able to bring in our clinical resources to play and take a look at what additional resources or what kind of change in the treatment plan might be helpful to get treatment onto the right track.
Siobhan, did you have any other questions that we can help answer about that program or anybody else?
Not right now. Thanks.
Okay.
Just want to do a quick time check. I think we've got about 1 minute. Do we, Siobhan,
We're going to have to
is it
shift
possible
things. Yeah, we're going to have to shift things around because we do need to get through these slides. So I'll text Ollie, but you should keep going.
Okay. I wonder, Sally, let's let's jump ahead a little bit here.
And we had scheduled, Andrew, till 11:20. Oh, no, you're right. Break at 11:15. Sorry, the agenda's a little funny, but we'll figure it out.
I wonder if we want to jump ahead to Weight Watchers and WebMD, but I guess, Siobhan, what are your thoughts on that? So there are a couple items we'd be jumping over that we discussed last month. So I don't know that there's necessarily new information around travel and lodging benefit.
I do think that, I
Dental and
mean,
vision.
and there aren't cost impacts associated with the Kaiser Permanente changes either.
Right.
Correct. Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
So I think, yes, we can move over this.
Okay. Do we want to talk about the travel and lodging again real quickly, Sally? And we'll.
I don't know if folks have questions. Go ahead if you want to.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we have two options with MODA and Providence, and option one provides the benefit if someone doesn't live within 50 miles, it doesn't have access to a network provider within 50 miles of their home. And with a $5,000 annual benefit. Option two also has that $5,000 annual benefit, but it expands what the coverage from not just providers to which they don't have access within 50 miles, but also if covered services are not available in their state of residence due to law or regulation, or when a COE, a Center of Excellence, is recommended. And so that's the one that we are recommending. It's a slightly more expensive, but we're recommending it because it provides greater access to the members rather than being limited to just that 50-mile radius. And then Kaiser has their option, which is where they will provide it based on the need. If someone needs to travel, they will provide the coverage. And they'll work with each one to establish their needs and help support them in their travel and receiving the care in the state where there's no Kaiser location. So anyway, so option two is what we recommend. Does anyone have any questions on this slide before we? Do you want to go through the dental really quickly too? I think we reviewed this before, the change in administrative fee on Delta Dental. Okay, 11.5. Okay, and so nothing's changed in the fee. We did introduce a couple of considerations, a couple of adjustments to the ortho benefit, increasing from 1,800 to 2,000 lifetime benefit, or option two is increasing to 2,500. And we provided the cost impact. We're recommending on both of these to decline. Your plans currently are above benchmarks. You can see below, we made a note that there's a median lifetime limit that we're seeing in our benchmarks of about 1,625, and you're at 1,800. And actually for state plans with 500 or more employees, it's at 1,500. So you are already offering a very generous orthodontia benefit. So that's why we're recommending to decline at this time.
And I'm sorry, on the orthodont benefit, is it more generous with Willamette than with Delta right now? Because the plans aren't the same, right?
Plans aren't the same. I think I can't remember what
I don't think it's on
Willamette
the
Dental
slides, but it's probably something worth our knowing in April when we're
Yeah,
making the
we'll make
final
some
decisions.
the benefits are different. Willamette is a copay for orthodontia benefits versus a lifetime maximum under MODA. So essentially, you pay, I can't remember exact number, $1,500 or $1,800 for, yeah. Sorry, what was that again, Andrew?
Sorry, Emery. It's $2,500 copay.
$2,500 copay for all the services, but orthodontia could be $5,000-$6,000. So you get the additional benefit beyond that $2,500 copay under Willamette. Well, Delta Dental, you only get $1,800 of benefit for orthodontia.
I just want to make sure we're paying attention to that because we know that there's access issues in some areas of the state with Willamette. So I just think we need to be mindful of what options are under Delta.
Yeah, that's a good point. The other thing to sort of consider is, around, Sean made some comments around, recruiting efforts, and how to sort of enhance those efforts from a benefits enrichment perspective. And so option one is a way to do that that's relatively inexpensive at $340,000. It's still an additional cost, but nonetheless something to think about.
You can keep going, thanks.
Yeah. And so this is no change from what we reported last month. It's a flat renewal, and we'll continue to discuss with them, but at this point, it's a flat renewal for Kaiser Dental.
And costs have been going down with them, right? I mean, that's part of the discussion because we have our
Yes,
claims
costs have been very low over the past
Okay.
few years compared to the premiums.
And then Willamette Dental, I think, is the next slide, and they're coming in with a rate hold. And they are, they currently have a benefit where they waive the initial office visit copay for new patient appointments. This is an effort to try to get people in and get them established. They'd like to continue that in 2024. There's no cost to PEBB, and we think this is a great idea in order for someone who chooses Willamette Dental in order to get them established and to encourage them to get in. And then Maggie, you want to continue to Vision? So Vision, it's a status quo. There's no change in the administrative fee for 2024. We recommend accepting that renewal. BSP also brought forward a proposed change on the Plus plan to increase the frame and contact lens allowance from the current of $225 and $200, and to increase it to $250 for Walmart and Sam's Club. And that's about a 3.3% increase in the cost, or $360,000. This would be applied just to the Plus plan. And, you know, the current benefits already, frames are, the differential between the plans is already like the frames are 150 on the base plan. So there's already a differential there. So we're recommending declining at this point, making this change. I don't know if anybody has, okay, we'll keep going. I want to get to Weight Watchers. So Weight Watchers, this is the program that the PEBB's been offering for quite some time to provide some support to those who who would like to lose weight and to help reduce the risk of some chronic conditions like diabetes, hypertension, or high cholesterol. And there are two options being offered, a core and a premium. So the core provides members access to online tools and a nutrition plan, whereas the premium provides a little more support through live coach workshops and person and virtual support to help support behavior changes. If we go to the next slide. So you can see the cost, what the cost has been for 2022 and for 2023. There's a slight decrease for this year. And Weight Watchers is proposing no change for 2024. And so this is spread over all the plans, but based on about 104 eligible members, the cost is about $125 per member per month. And then we have some estimates of like the cost per prescribed members, about $180, $179, and the cost per pound loss has been about $174 based on previous cost for 2023. At this point, we're recommending approve renewal for 2024 and then evaluate the effectiveness through PMAC and Worksite Wellness to develop a recommendation for 2025.
Yeah, and so the sort of thought behind that approach is that when we look at the cost and engagement for both this program and WebMD, which we'll get to in a couple of slides, it seems like there's not a lot of utilization to really justify the costs. And so this strategy would renew for 1 year and then reevaluate if there's a way to boost engagement, or if there's a decision to discontinue the program altogether through the PMAC Worksite Wellness channels. So that's kind of where we landed on why we justified that recommendation. But you'll see the same recommendation on WebMD.
I just wanted to comment that I appreciate the PMAC's willingness to look at both of the programs more thoroughly and evaluate them and give us a recommendation.
And so if we go to the next slide, Maggie, I think we've got our next few slides, an overview of the program. So WebMD, so this is a digital tool and provides the services listed, the daily habits, challenges, podcasts, health record trackers, etc., and other material and content. So if we go to the next slide. So we did a little calculation of the cost. Estimated cost is about $304,000 based on a little over 100,000 members. And it's 25 cents per member per month, the charge to PEBB for this service. We did some calculations based on utilization. The utilization's in the appendix, but if we do the calculation over all of the touch points on the platform registration, the webinar, and the newsletter subscribers, the cost for all per participant or per engaged person is about $100. So these are a little higher, but it maybe a little better gauge is the $100 per person who engages with the platform. And so this is, as Andrew said, we have the same recommendation for WebMD as we do for Weight Watchers. And so I think if nobody has any questions, we can move to the next, which I hand back to Andrew.
Thank you, Sally. So I see we've got about 10 minutes. I think that should be just enough time. Yes, Sean, I see you have your hand raised.
Related to WebMD and also Weight Watchers, I think this comes up perennially, but do we have is there an opportunity, I mean, is there a way to tie payments to engagement? Essentially, like yeah, I mean, it's like, in order to contain the per person cost, it's like up to them. If they're able to engage our members, then they get paid, and if they don't, then they don't. You know, is there a way to do that contractually? Have you seen that before, or have some kind of performance attached, as you know? So it's like not like you're cutting off the program, being like, well, that's useless. It's more just like, the better they perform, the more they get paid. Or, you know, like if they're not engaging our people, then they don't. Then our costs go down. Have you seen that?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
Yeah. Generally, I would say, and I welcome others' thoughts, but I would say that's sort of best practice. I'm not sure the history on how it got loaded as sort of a fixed fee spread across the whole population. But generally speaking, whenever we can tie a fee to engagement like that, it's going to be better. You're incentivizing the carrier, and you know. And I see Dr. Neldner, you're on. Did you want to comment on that?
I can comment on. I'm not thoroughly familiar with what's included with either of the programs, but generally speaking, Weight Watchers for sure is one that we see in the marketplace that can be provided on a per user basis. So not just the per population fee, and that one could be continuing utilization. The WebMD, I think, is a portal and access to the information that's on the portal. We generally do see that priced as a per employee per month fee. So this model of fee payment for the WebMD is not unusual. There are sub-services within WebMD's book of services, like coaching and participation in certain events that could be charged on a per participant basis. But generally speaking, access to the platform, they do charge on a per member per month basis.
So I guess I would just say, I think this comes up every year, and I guess I don't want to have the same conversation again next year. So I don't know why it continuously doesn't happen. Yeah, maybe for next meeting we can just have, like, what is it like to change that?
Sure.
And hey, Sean, sorry, this is Margaret, just to chime in. I put a comment in the chat. So our agreement with WebMD currently do have some performance guarantees built into them, and a portion of those guarantees are tied to some engagement metrics. So we can certainly bring back more information about the specifics of that. And it is related to a portion of the overall cost that overall 304,000 annual amount.
That would be lovely to see that, yeah. And then thanks, Margaret, for that reminder. And even with those, it's still coming out in this kind of dollars and cents analysis of, kind of neither here nor there as far as cost benefit. So that's it's interesting. So yeah, let's take a look at that.
Maybe just the other, sorry to add another wrinkle to this, but another consideration is the kinds of services or the portal access that you're probably getting from WebMD right now are probably the kinds of services and access that you may eventually look at if you do go to market for a hub vendor that is a portal to all of your health and well-being services. So at that point, it might very well be duplicative. But at this point, the fact that it's not tied to other services and other ways of people knowing about it, communication promotion is probably a bit of a challenge as well, and probably relates to why the utilization is so low.
All right, Andrew, we're going to let you finish us up through the last several slides. Thanks.
Okay, 5 minutes. Yeah, thank you for those comments. So with this last section, we've just added a couple of slides to sort of get board members thinking about what this might look like this time next month once we have a better sense for our updated composite rate. These are 4 tools that you have in your sort of toolbox when it comes to driving down cost. Regarding negotiations, we are continuing those with the carriers. Improving efficiency really captures some of these clinical programs that we've been talking about. Those are always excellent ways to drive down costs. It's good for the member, it's good for the plan. And so whenever there's opportunities related to programs like that, those are always something we want to take a really close look at. Making benefit changes is another sort of lever you have available to you. What we're proposing, well, I'll hold it for the next slide, I guess. And then the fourth is using stabilization funds, which Emery talked about, what that does to the reserve over time. If you were to, purely use reserve funds to buy down to 3.4% versus adjusting costs in other ways through these other levers. And so if we want to jump to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit more about that third category, making benefit changes. And really, when we talk about benefit changes, obviously this isn't something that we want to do every year, sort of a knee-jerk reaction to a high renewal, right? We want to be strategic about it and thoughtful. There are potentially opportunities to align between the carriers, as opposed to just more of like a pure cost shift. We're going to increase the deductibles across the plans type of thing. Considering when we're considering these plan design changes, we spent a lot of time talking about the quintuple aim during the retreat. And so with health equity at the center, but considering some of the other 4 components of that quintuple aim, when you're prioritizing, what plan design changes, if any, are sort of appetizing for the board. And so, one example might be around ER copays. This might be an opportunity to drive efficiency. But for those members who are still having, legitimate emergent needs, that copay would not apply for those services they received at the ER. We did bullet out just a couple of potential opportunities to align. Kaiser's pharmacy copay, PCP specialist copays, and ER copays are lower than MODA and Providence Choice, and so there could be something there. But ultimately, once we meet next month and have a refresh look at costs and the composite rate, ultimately what we will likely recommend is to make sort of minor plan design changes if needed to hit this 3.4%. And reevaluate potentially indexing some of the plan design components for 2025. And so whenever you have a fixed cost component of a plan, that will cause that plan to get a little bit richer every year because your underlying healthcare costs are going up, but your deductible or your PCP copay, those are staying flat. And so the plan is picking up a larger percentage of that cost. And so there is value in doing an exercise every however many years to reevaluate if your current fixed cost components of your plan still make sense. Another way to think about that is if you had a plan that was purely co-insurance driven, you're just paying a percentage of the cost, that plan would not need to be indexed, right? Because it's just a percentage of your underlying costs. And so as the total cost increases, the members out of pocket will increase in tandem with that total underlying cost, if that makes sense. I'll pause there because I know there's a lot to sort of unpack when we start talking about benefit changes, and there's lots of reasons why we want to maintain the richness on behalf of PEB members, and so I'll pause there and see if there's any reaction so far. Maybe I was talking too fast for folks to have a chance to digest that.
I appreciate the slide, Andrew. It is a lot for us to be getting our heads around.
Maybe food for thought, and we'll talk about it some more next month for sure. And this is a good segue to jump to slide 45, Maggie. And so we'll release the round 3 renewal request later this week. When we meet next month, we'll have that refresh look on the composite rate. So we'll talk about what mechanisms the board wants to look at to get that down to 3.4% if needed. And our negotiations with carriers are ongoing. And so as we look forward to the following month in May, we are targeting having the board vote on any renewal decisions in May. If we can get all final decisions in May, that will sort of preclude the need for a June meeting. If we don't get through it all, then my understanding is, in prior years, there is that option to extend into June if needed. So again, sorry for the sort of speaking quickly there at the end to sort of come in just 1 minute over at 11:36, but happy to take any questions, or if folks want to digest stuff and send over via email, we welcome that as well. So I'll pause there.
Andrew, thank you. Thank you, Mercer team. And I think the folks do need their 10-minute break. We've been getting a lot of information and really do appreciate it, and appreciates the board's discussion around this too. And we'll continue the discussion in April. So let's all take a 10-minute break till 11:47. Thank you. Right, welcome back, everyone. Hope you had a good break and moved around. So I believe we have Teresa leading the next section. Is that right? Teresa and Brian?
Hey, Siobhan, this is Teresa. Dr. Neldner from Mercer is going to present, and Brian and I are going to be here to support and answer questions if needed.
All right, great. Go ahead, Dr. Neldner.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Teresa and Brian and everyone on the board. So if you recall, last July, we came to the board to talk about the well-being framework. And the well-being framework started with PMAC and the Worksite Wellness Coordinating Council identifying all of the resources that were currently available to PEBB members from the carriers and other providers. And also to look at ways that we could better promote and communicate those to members. The next phase in the well-being framework was to actually work on a well-being strategy. So today we're here to report to you the progress on the well-being strategy. And you'll see in the following slides that we gathered a work group and we came up with some very good information that we're going to share with you today. You can see, first of all, that Brian and Teresa helped gather a wide variety of different people in the organization who partnered on this well-being strategy work. You can see their names and their affiliations for the different agencies there. I'll just pause so you have a chance to read them. And this group was very diligent. We had 4 different sessions over the course of about 4 months to convene and work on developing the strategy that we're about to share with you. So we can advance, please. We started out with creating the mission and vision statement. And this is the statement that was the final result. After a little wordsmithing, PEBB offers an equitable and sustainable well-being initiative to support each member's unique well-being journey. And along with the mission and vision statement, we also developed some guiding principles and some other pieces of the strategy that were important to the overall well-being strategy to make it effective once it's executed. So we started out, and this is a high-level review. We call this the framework. We call this a sort of a placemat summary slide of all the work. We're going to show you some more detail in a couple of slides, but this sort of summarizes everything. And you can see we started out with defining the environment, how many different agencies and how many different employees, the composition of the workforce, average age, union participation. We also looked at some of the barriers, as you can see in the second column from the right. So acknowledging that people are not all working in person anymore. There are some virtual options, so we need to consider that. We know there's remoteness. Some of employees are in remoter areas of the state. We know that navigating what's already there has been a challenge as we went through that first phase and identified the resources that are there, how individual members navigate to those different things, knowing what's available to them from their carrier or from the other resources, feeling supported in that hybrid environment where they're not always in person, finding alignment among key partners. So we know that there are a variety of different organizations and every agency is working on their own and has their own wellness plan. So how are we aligning between and among those, and are we all headed in the same direction in different ways, but at least in the same direction? Then setting clear priorities for well-being, including health equity. So we wanted to acknowledge health equity, and you'll see that health equity was an important element of our consideration throughout this process. And then we want to make sure that the well-being strategy makes a difference, that people are happy and productive, and particularly in light of the challenges of mental health through the pandemic era and just in general with the challenges in the world today. So you can see that we also acknowledge that there, for some of the services, long wait times, limited access, and also choice of modalities is sometimes limited for some of the services. So we really wanted to look at those things right from the beginning to be able to plan for overcoming barriers as well. And then we also defined some success measures, some ways that if we achieve it, we will know that we've achieved it because we have some metrics that will point to that. So sustained engagement. Are we getting people to be involved in something continuously throughout the year? Not just one time a year to say, I'm acknowledging that I completed a health assessment and I'll do a couple of other things, but maybe I do or don't do those things throughout the course of the year. We'd really like to see people throughout their daily lives engaging in something that's promoting their health and well-being. Measures for cost avoidance for PEB. Trying to manage the trend, as we've all been talking about this morning. If we can have better health, we can do a better job at managing healthcare costs. Health equity, as I mentioned before, key element and key focus, and we'll look for some metrics that can show progress toward achieving better health equity. And then we really recognize that some of the things that you'll see in the strategy are not completely within the control of the PEB and PEB board or any individuals necessarily, but there's going to need to be collaboration between and among agencies, different organizations within the state, and generally how we influence the culture and the support of the organization to achieve ultimate and optimal well-being for all. And then, of course, what's most important is the user experience. If this isn't a meaningful, engaging experience for the individual, the likelihood of people staying involved is less. So with that, we identified some guiding principles. I'm bouncing now back to the left-hand side of this slide. Some of the things that we thought were important were targeting engagement and morale, really wanting to look at all aspects of the well-being definition so that we're being comprehensive and appealing to as many people as we can with something that's innate for them. Really want to move away from a dependence on just external motivators, like maybe a HEM incentive. That's a good place to get people started and to encourage them to get involved. But ideally, people find value in what they've experienced throughout their health and well-being journey, and that will help motivate them internally to continue for a lifetime. Position well-being to be a unique and core value in PEB's multi-year strategy. So we value the health and well-being of PEB members. Develop a strategy that's personalized to the unique needs of PEB's population. So as we fine-tune the offerings that are available, how can we better personalize these and help direct people to things that are really right for them without them having to throw up their hands and say, this is what I want, but I don't know where to find it. And then implementing cost control strategies. Again, we're looking for the opportunity to help manage the trend by better managing people's health. And the more we can do that, the better utilization experience and cost experience you'll see in your health plan as well. And then ensuring alignment between the well-being strategy and your different agency and the overall state of Oregon's employer and organizational priorities. So the very highest level of strategy that we came up with, this is a high level summary. You're going to see a little bit more detail on future slides, but the strategy that the work group identified was to develop and execute a multi-year well-being strategy. So that's the starting point. We're going to talk about that. That addresses all dimensions of health and well-being, offer personalized well-being activities designed to support health equity and inclusion, address the needs of varied workforce and their locations. Again, a nod to that hybrid workforce and the different challenges that it might have. Build leadership and cultural support, because we know that's the #1 best practice for achieving success with health and well-being initiatives in the workplace. Review and upgrade programs and services as needed. Do we have the right programs in place? We had a little bit of conversation about that this morning, and this is part of the overall mission, is to see if the services that are in place right now are still the right ones and are the providers the right ones as well. And then improving program integration, member navigation experience. So this is what I was alluding to earlier when I was saying there's a lot of stuff out there, as we all know, but how can members get to it seamlessly? And once they're in one area of one service, how does that service help refer them to other services that they might also need, and to make that a seamless experience for members? And then, and this points to the success measures, establish targets for the key success metrics and evaluate programs' impact and outcomes. So measure what you expect. If we really want to achieve success in these areas, we want to not only have metrics that we can look at and say, this is what they are, we want targets to shoot for so that we know if we're making progress toward achieving those success metrics. So that was a lot in just a few seconds or minutes there, but I'll pause there and see what your reactions are before I go into any more detail. And again, we're doing this to get your reactions. You don't have to have them immediately and today, but when we talk about next steps and where we want to go with this, we want to make sure that we're aligned with your thinking and where you want to go with this. So that's part of the opportunity today, is to obtain your feedback if you wish to give it. If no comments here, let's move forward, please, to the next slide. And I'm going to mention that we, Teresa, led an effort to complete the Hero Scorecard a couple of times already, and most recently in the last year. And there are 6 domains. And by the way, Teresa's reported out to you about the Hero Scorecard results. We use the 6 domains, 6 dimensions that are included in the Hero Scorecard as a framework for the multi-year strategy. So you'll see those along the left side column on the next 3 slides: strategic planning, organization, cultural support, and you'll see the others in a moment. I want to point out in particular, and you've probably already noticed, the pinkish colored text and the legend that shows that anything that's highlighted in that pinkish color is related to mental health, diversity, equity, inclusion, and social determinants of health. So we wanted to, right from the very beginning, show that health equity was a key focus and a key area of interest. And throughout this process, we intentionally looked for ways to identify strategies that were going to help achieve that goal of health equity. And I'm not going to read through each and every one of these, and I know we're strapped for time anyway today, but I want to give you an example here, and we can move to the next slide to see examples of the programs and program integration. The other thing, you'll see a footnote on the bottom of each of these slides that says we are thinking aggressively and aspirationally, perhaps, in the sense that there's a lot in 2023. We recognize that. And as we move through the next phases of this process to move from taking these strategic elements and defining a tactical plan to achieve those strategic elements, we'll be evaluating priorities and how much can actually be accomplished in the course of any one of these years. But clearly, if you see the pattern, and just using this as an example, anything that's in 2023, well, oftentimes something is initiated, then it's evaluated, and maybe evaluated further in following years as more data becomes available as to how to evaluate that and make adjustments as needed. But that's the pattern that you'll probably see rather consistently for some of those items across the different years. And then the last slide on this framework is the participation strategies and measurement and evaluation. And again, you can see that a very substantial number of ideas and strategies in 2023, and some of those could be shifted. And again, consideration for health equity and its elements throughout. I'm going to pause and see if Teresa or Brian have anything to say here before we go to the next steps and where we intend to go with this.
I just want to let folks, oh, go ahead, Brian.
I just said I'm good. Thank you, Stephen.
Oh, okay. As Dr. Neldner said, it's very ambitious. We have lots of things on these slides. And even within each of these strategies, we've come up with different discrete steps that will help PMAC, the council, staff, and Mercer all understand who's doing what in order to accomplish those strategies.
So that's a great segue to the next slide. We're going to talk about next steps. Just a quick review of what we've done. So we started this process of working with the group on developing the strategy in February. Actually, we started at the end of last year, but we actually presented to the PMAC and the Worksite Wellness Coordinating Council in February where we had come with the work that we did on strategy with the strategy work group, refine and revise the strategy based upon feedback. And in March, here we are presenting to you the draft. We have a PMAC meeting on Thursday of this week where we're going to start talking about the future next steps, which are really what Teresa was alluding to. Now we intend to move from taking these strategic elements to defining tactics to achieve them and prioritizing the different strategies. We intend to be working with PMAC and the council throughout the rest of the year to do that. And we will, Teresa, Brian, and the Mercer staff will help frame up those discussions and give guidance to the PMAC and the council on how to move from strategy to tactics. And you can see that we intend to do that throughout the summer. There will be continuous review by the Health Equity Committee at different points throughout this process. And then we will share the tactical roadmap once we've gotten to that point back with PMAC and the coordinating council if there have been any updates from the Health Equity Committee. And finally, we'll come back to you at some future point in time to talk about the tactics and get your guidance and approval to move forward with those as well.
Thank you, Dr. Neldner. And this is Brian. And just to, I think, reiterate the previous comment that the strategy, we may have bitten off more than we can chew for this year. And so part of what we'll do with the committees is not only develop specific tactics, but we'll also think amongst ourselves whether the overall body of work is doable in any given year. And part of those future discussions we may need to have with the board is helping us prioritize some of these to the extent we can't do everything in a given year.
I just want to comment. I mean, I really do appreciate the work that you all are doing with our PMAC committee and the overall Worksite Wellness Coordinating Council. It's a lot for us to digest, and I know we just had a robust discussion around renewals for 2024. And board members may need a little more time to look through the information on these slides. And is the best way, if there are questions that are coming up, for us to channel them through Ali, and then he can get them to you? That makes sense, Ali?
Yeah, that would be perfect, Siobhan.
I know we squeezed you on time, so thank you.
That's quite all right. And thank you very much for the opportunity. We look forward to continuing to work with you.
All right, on to Paid Leave Oregon, a new program for our state, and how that interacts with short-term disability. So, David, I'm not going to say your last name right, so I'm going to let you say it yourself.
Thanks, Siobhan. Hi, David Scarce, National Account Consultant with the Standard. I've been working with the PEBB accounts since about 1997. I'm here today to talk to you about Oregon's Paid Family Medical Leave Plan. They call it Paid Leave Oregon, and how that is going to impact PEBB's short-term disability plan. Next slide, please. So I'm assuming most of you know what Paid Leave Oregon is, but just to make sure everybody's on the same page, I'm going to go over a few slides here to just kind of level set on what this plan is. So Paid Leave Oregon is a plan that allows employees, members, to be paid when they are out on a leave, and whether that is their family leave, their own medical leave, they now have a way to get paid through this plan called Paid Leave Oregon. The plan starts September 3rd of 2023, so it's coming up later, a little bit later this year. However, contributions for the program began back on January 1st of 2023. And the contribution is 1% of payroll up to $132,900. So that's per individual. And that's split between employee contributions and employer contributions. The employee is paying 60% of that 1%, and the employer is paying 40%. So an example here, if an employee is earning $1,000 in wages, then the employee pays $6 and the employer pays $4. So that's how the plan is going to be funded. Next slide, please. So what it covers, Paid Leave Oregon covers family leaves, much like FMLA today, for example, bonding, taking care of a family member with a health condition, things like that. There's also a medical leave component to this. So now, rather than just taking care of your family member, you actually can get paid when you go out on a leave for your own health condition. So unlike FMLA, where you're on protected leave if you're out for your own health condition, or if you are out taking care of a family member, you're now going to get paid for these things while you're off. And Oregon also has something a little bit unique. It's called safe leave, where you have, someone who may be in a domestic violence situation, sexual assault, being stalked, things like that. They can take leave, safe leave, and get paid for that. Next slide, please. I'm not going to go into all the details on this slide, but this is kind of a real good overview of the program, how it's calculated, and I'm just going to hit on a couple of pieces that I think are important to understand. I already mentioned the plan contributions. The benefit waiting period for this program, this is a very rich program. There is no benefit waiting period. So if someone takes off one day, they can get paid for that day. So unlike a short-term disability claim, for example, if a member goes out for their own health condition, they have to wait 7 days before they become eligible for benefits. Under Paid Leave Oregon, it's immediate. 0-day benefit wait. The maximum benefit period under the Paid Leave Oregon plan is 12 weeks, and that refreshes every 12 months. So not to be confused with annually, but when an individual takes a paid leave, a qualifying paid leave, that's when that 12-month calendar starts. So as soon as they take that first day, they then have 12 weeks within the next 12 months that they can use. If they use up all that 12 weeks in 6 months and they had something else that occurred 8 months down the road, they're not going to be covered because they will not get a refresh of that 12 weeks until that end of that 12-month period. It also will run concurrently with FMLA and Oregon's OFLA. The other thing to point out is the state, the wage replacement. Like I said, this is a very rich program. It's going to pay a maximum benefit of 120% of the state's annual average weekly wage. And that currently is $1,469.78 weekly. And that's based on a state average weekly wage of $1,223.82. And the state will review that every July and then implement that going forward. So right now, this weekly wage is $1,469. It's going to be reviewed July 1 of 2023. So we can anticipate that that's probably going to be somewhere north of $1,500 once this program comes into effect in September. Next slide, please. So how does this then work with short-term disability? So paid leave Oregon would be considered a primary benefit. So short-term disability has always been a supplementary benefit. If a member has other forms of what we consider deductible income, then your short-term disability plan is supplementary. If you don't have any other forms of income, your short-term disability plan is primary. So in this case, paid leave Oregon is primary, and your short-term disability plan is secondary or supplemental. So with that maximum paid leave Oregon benefit of $1,470, basically, the short-term disability plan that PEBB has a maximum benefit of $1,662, and these are weekly benefits, by the way. So that means that there's not really going to be a circumstance very often where a member is ever going to receive more than $192 a week now, because you'll be offsetting the amount that the member gets from paid leave Oregon. So I have an example down here. So a member earning $60,000 a year, they go out with Paid Leave Oregon and they get an income replacement of $975 a week. As you can see, that's an 84% income replacement. So they're already exceeding the amount they would receive under short-term disability. The short-term disability plan has a 60% income replacement. So because it's already exceeding the maximum under short-term disability, the short-term disability plan will then revert to a minimum benefit of $25 a week. So in this case, this member now is getting $1,000 a week. They're getting 87% income replacement. Next slide, please. So what does this really mean then for the short-term disability plan? The short-term disability plan now obviously is going to have a lot less value than it had before. We're not going to be paying out the amount of dollars that we were paying out before. So Standard has gone and looked at this. Our actuaries have looked at this and reevaluated what kind of an impact we think Paid Leave Oregon is going to have. So there are going to be some circumstances where the member is going to get more than a $25 minimum benefit. If you're a higher wage earner, you might get that $192 a week. There are other circumstances where if a member was working outside of Oregon, so someone lived in Washington and they were working in Washington, they wouldn't be paying into Paid Leave Oregon, so therefore they may still get their normal short-term disability plan. You also have those situations where someone could have exceeded that 12 weeks of Paid Leave Oregon in a 12-month period. So somebody goes out for a maternity leave, takes their bonding, and they've exhausted their 12 weeks, and 6 months later, they stepped off a curb and got hit by a bus. Now they don't have any Paid Leave Oregon coverage, so their short-term disability plan will pick that up. So taking all those factors into consideration, we calculated an almost 80% reduction in premium. So the little chart here kind of shows what we're receiving currently for short-term disability premiums, about $15.1 million. So that's expected with this rate reduction to decrease to about $3.2 million. And again, this is kind of assuming that enrollment stays the same, which probably you're going to have people that will drop this plan. It is a voluntary plan, so they can pick and choose if they want to keep it each year at annual enrollment. So we would anticipate some folks will probably drop this, but at the same time, it's a pretty significant premium reduction. So we think that it's not going to cost members a lot to have that extra protection if they want it. Next slide, please. So, what we're offering is a 78.7% reduction in premium. And so that means the premium is reducing from 0.75% of payroll to 0.16% of payroll. So pretty substantial reduction there. And no changes to the long-term disability plan, because the long-term disability plans PEBB has right now, they have 90-day and 180-day benefit waiting periods. So you're not going to have that situation where someone's going to be receiving Paid Leave Oregon that's going to extend into, or beyond the benefit waiting period for long-term disability. So there's no need to make any changes to the long-term disability plans.
And David, I don't know if you saw Andy had her hand up. Andy,
Oh,
did you still have a question?
I do. I was actually going to ask, so can members choose not to use Paid Leave Oregon and just use their short-term disability, or use that first and then use Paid Leave Oregon?
Well, I mean, they can choose to do that, but we would turn around and tell them they're eligible for this benefit, so they have to take it. So it's much like if a member was on a long-term disability plan and they said, oh, I'm just going to get my long-term disability benefits, and then when those run out, I'll apply for Social Security disability or PERS disability. The policy clearly states that you have to apply for benefits you're eligible for, and in this case, they're eligible for Paid Leave Oregon, so therefore they have to apply for that. If they did not apply for it and went ahead and applied for short-term disability benefits, we would go ahead and apply an offset and let them know that here's how much we're reducing their benefit by. If you need to apply for this benefit, if you apply for it and later get a different amount, you need to let us know.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So there's not going to be a situation where someone can essentially kind of double dip. They can take 12 weeks of paid leave and then take an additional 12 weeks of STD on top of that. The Paid Leave Oregon plan, as I mentioned, is very rich. If you are, if you make $41,000 or less a year, you get 100% income replacement. It doesn't even drop below 70% income replacement until you're over $110,000 a year. And kind of getting to that level of the max of the benefit, the income replacement under the short-term disability plan, which is 60%, that's somebody earning, $140,000 a year. So it's a very rich plan, and I think you'll see pretty high utilization, especially with lower wage income earners that can see, almost, 80, 90, 100% income replacement. Any questions before I push this to Mercer? Next slide then.
Okay, hi, this is Andrew on the Mercer team. We have one of our life and disability consultants on the line. Paul, if you want to take us through the slide, please.
Yeah, sure. So we did a similar analysis, and I'll have to admit that when I was looking at this, I was pushing out, anticipating that this wouldn't be put into effect for you until 2024, and I think I'm probably a little bit overzealous on my projection of what the future benefit might be. But when I went through and I looked at what the standard put together, I'm getting essentially exactly the same thing. You're looking at, it's a very rich benefit. You're only going to have some people that are in the higher income brackets that are going to be receiving a top-up benefit that's available through the standards plan. The interesting thing is that what we're seeing with a lot of these statutory plans is that because the state average weekly wage goes up every year, it's going to create kind of an interesting, um, you know, how will these two benefits coordinate well together? Currently you're seeing a pretty decent, potential top up for people, but as time goes by and that state average wage goes up, you might see the benefits of the top up start to dwindle. So, you may get down to the point where eventually the state benefit could be better than what the benefit would be from the top up. But one of the things that we've wanted to point out is that there is a decrease in the amount of time. You've got this combined 12 weeks of family and medical leave, which could still put you in a position of having a situation where maybe your employees still want to have some sort of an additional benefit available because the 12 weeks may go pretty fast, and if you've used that all through Oregon, you may not have anything left. So we still do see some clients that are considering offering a benefit to their employees outside of just what Oregon is offering. So if you're looking for an opportunity to provide employees with something that they could either buy up to or something that would allow them to continue to have a little bit better benefit in case, that's the whole point of short-term disability or voluntary short-term disability, is to give employees an opportunity to make sure that they feel covered and that they're comfortable with what they've got. So yeah, I don't know that, I did a lot of the work on trying to put together the financial portion of this. I think that one of my partners may have gone through with some of this with you already, what some of the additional administrative features might be. So I don't know if I have anything else to add to this. I don't know if you have any questions you'd like to ask of me either, but I'm happy to answer anything that I know about this.
I mean, I was just going to make a comment, which is, I mean, it seems that this has always been optional for people to take the short-term disability. And I don't know why we wouldn't continue to have it as an option based on what you presented.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Siobhan, I would totally agree with that. Again, it comes down to member choice. Does the member see the value in having some additional protection? And if they do, they keep their short-term disability plan. And if they don't, they can drop it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I mentioned it, but the premium reduction that we're talking about would be effective September 1st of 2023 to kind of dovetail with the paid leave Oregon coming into effect September 3rd, 2023.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, I'm along the same lines. I mean, it's something I've had forever. Fortunately, I've never had to use it that much. But I know in our line of work and several other lines of work for state employees, this is something that is used sometimes more than, sorry, excuse me, sometimes more than once a year. So having that additional backup, I think, is something we need to offer our employees.
Yeah, and the other nice part about having the short-term disability plan is you still have access to some of the additional services that the standard provides through its short-term disability program, whether that's our Workplace Possibilities program that assists members in getting back to work and making accommodations, whether that's our Health Advocate program. So there's all kinds of services that they still have access to by having that coverage, even if the monetary amount of the disability coverage isn't as high as it used to be. There are still other services that they're getting access to at a substantially reduced rate.
And short term is not like on a yearly. I mean, I'm not. Short term is not one of those things that if I use it November, December, January, then I can't use it again. It's not like FMLA. Short term can be used at any time. Once that is completed, 3 months down the road, I have another incident. The short term can be used again. Whereas yes. Said, this 12-month rolling clock, which I know the rolling clock is nice because that sometimes helps. Sometimes it doesn't. It just depends on how it's taken. But that 12-month rolling clock can really slow down that back end of the year for individuals. So again, that's something I think we really need to keep.
All right, well, thank you, David. I know we have a couple more reports this morning or this afternoon. We've passed the noon hour.
Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you. So, Margaret, did you want to give us an update from the Innovations Work Group?
Yes. Hi, good afternoon. It is afternoon. I apologize for that. I just had to tweak my camera to get on. I do have a brief update about the Innovation Work Group for you today. I don't have any slides or attachments, so this is just really a verbal update about what the work group has been focusing on, and just to provide you with sort of a heads up of some of the things that are in the works. Two major things that the work group is looking at, both last month, this month, and I anticipate next month as well, so for a several month period, are centers of excellence and performance guarantees. And so I will share some info about performance guarantees first. So as you likely are aware, currently in our medical carrier contracts, we have performance guarantees in place in a couple of different areas. One of those areas is related to clinical quality measures and carrier performance on those measures. That information is being reviewed and finalized for next contract year in CIAO. We've kind of divided the performance guarantees and the strategies on evidence and outcome work group was kind of the better place for those clinical measures to be looked at in depth. But in the innovation work group, we have two particular performance guarantees we're assessing right now. The first one is the trend rate guarantee we have, which involves language in our medical carrier contracts that requires carriers put 5% of their administrative fees at risk for remaining within the 3.4% annual cap on our cost growth. And so we, it being sort of the time of year where we review all things related to our contracting and engage in our renewals, this is appropriate timing to take a look at contract language and the specifics of that and identify any potential updates that might be needed. The work group has, and we'll have a little bit further discussion this afternoon in their meeting about a proposed update to that guarantee that would still retain the 3.4% guarantee with 5% of administrative fees at risk across all carriers for both PEBB and OEB, but would make a slight adjustment in terms of how it's measured for fully insured versus self-insured. And that has to do with just sort of recognizing that there are some differences in how risk is managed in a fully insured versus self-insured plan, and trying to build in some allowance for that. So we are working with Mercer on slightly revised language that we will discuss in the innovation work group, and we'll certainly be happy to share, more detail with the board as warranted. The second guarantee that we're working on right now in the innovation work group is a new one that we would like to add to contracts, and it is proposed to put 5% of carriers' administrative fees at risk for them achieving the targets on value-based payment levels as specified in the Oregon Value-Based Payment Compact. And so we are looking at some specifics around exactly how to structure that language. The compact specifies for the 2024 year, specifies different targets for the various VBP categories, Land 3A versus Land 3B. Land 3A involves really upside risk sharing with providers. 3B involves both upside and downside risk sharing. And then also the compact has some different targets in terms of looking at total spending versus spending on primary care and hospitals. And so we're looking at options for how to structure the language to allocate, fees at risk, that 5% of admin fees we would put at risk across the different value-based payment categories, as well as the different provider types specified in the compact, total primary care and hospitals. So more work occurring on that in the next couple of months. And our goal is to really have, in line with the renewal schedule, to have performance guarantee language final by May. So that when we tie up renewals, those dollars at risk are set for our 2024 contracts. I'll pause for a second if there's any questions about that. And if not, I'll keep going. The next topic that the Innovation Work Group is hard at work on and has been for a while is the Centers of Excellence program development. We are working through our 2023 project plan, which involves capturing updated and more comprehensive data from all payer, all claims to further validate the metrics we're using to measure facility quality. Those facility quality measures are going to be what help us tier the various centers of excellence facilities in terms of the hospitals and ambulatory surgical centers that provide these procedures, identifying the various quality tiers for our program design. At today's meeting for the Innovation Work Group, we're going to look at a couple aspects of program development, including the work group's going to have some general discussion reviewing guiding principles. We are going to look at a proposed plan for partner engagement throughout the process, which will include, it includes both, engaging both boards as well as our carrier partners and stakeholder groups, constituent groups, in terms of those groups like PMAC and member facing groups, such as OEB has a stakeholder advisory committee as well. So identifying how we will engage those folks and incorporate them where we need to obtain their reaction and thoughts on what's proposed. So that stakeholder engagement plan is part of the agenda today, as well as we have some draft contract requirements related to things that we would require in contracts with facilities under this program. So a couple of specific topics related to centers of excellence in general on the agenda for today. Looking forward for 2023, centers of excellence is the main project for the work group. So every month we'll be covering different aspects of the program development as we move through the project plan. And at present, we expect that late spring, once renewals wrap, we will be coming to the board with a full update on project status to get your reaction and input, because then we will be returning to the board in the fall with recommendations for the board to consider for the 2025 plan year. So kind of trying to time that so that those come to the board in late fall. And as we prepare for the next year's renewals, we have board decisions related to those recommendations. So I'm happy to take any other questions.
All right. Thank you, Margaret.
Great. Thank you.
And Ali, I know we're at 12:30. I do want to let you give your report, so go ahead.
Yeah, just two quick things. Just first to thank you, Siobhan, for the Ways and Means presentation this morning with the OEB chair. Went really well and got great feedback from the OHA director and from the committee. So thank you, Siobhan. And we did receive the poll results on the board meeting preferences. Appreciate the board for voting on that. And it was nearly, the clear winner was intermittent meetings. I think it was 90%. So if it's okay with the board, we'll get together with board leadership and determine maybe a schedule of in-person meetings and virtual meetings over the next year. And then the board can revisit that format next year. So we'll put a proposed schedule together and then run it by the board. And that's all I had.
Right, thank you, Ollie. Rose, do we have any public comment today?
No, no public comment.
All right, thank you, Rose. So we will go ahead and approve our minutes at our next meeting. Since we didn't do that at the top of the agenda, we can do February and March and April. So we will officially adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.